go on with your story.
They say they travel on the ship across, they call them Kalapani, which means black water. And then eventually, when they get here, you know, different people in different places. But eventually, people like Peru was smart enough that they could outsmart the system. And he was such a good fighter that, you know, he was very, very light complected. And so he I don't know how he got a hold of some British attire and a hat and everything. And he would bribe the guards. He came with quite a bit of money, and he hid him actually in ladies' quarters because nobody to search over there. And if somebody didn't treat somebody very good, like the overseers or something, and like the drivers, you know, the driver, they call them driver because they drive people with whips, and that's why they call them drivers. So these guys would beat these people, especially the women, you know, and beat them into submission, basically. And Peru would see that, and he wouldn't say anything. But at night, he'll put on his British attire, and he put on his very strong British accent, and he'll go up there and he'll teach somebody a good lesson and say, don't you ever do that again. If you do that, I'll come and take care of you again. And so people were afraid of this mysterious character. And eventually they made a lot of money. He and his partner made a lot of money and then started business. But his partner ran the business, and he stayed into the estate just to see what's going on. But they stole a lot of stuff from the estate. And
things like that happened.
And so they sold it in the black market. That's who was making money. And so he was quite, the guy did very well for himself.
You got a lot in your genes, man. Fighting, black market too. What else will come out? What else will come out in your story?
It's called survival. And, you know, I can relate a little bit, having gone to America by myself with $200 and stuff like this and had to survive, go to college and everything. I know what survival is all about. Any one of us, we have that survival skill. And when we pushed against the wall, when we were being pushed, you know, to the limits, it's amazing what the human can do. We sometimes don't understand our own capabilities. So men like Dasai and Peru and all these people, you know, like Kangal was another one who was quite a character too. They learn how to deal with the system, and they could not be watched. And so they managed quite well. Most of them managed quite well. What really happened, like the women, they could not fight back. They didn't have the skills to do it, but they couldn't work hard enough. And so they got their bound extended more and more and more.
Because they were fined excessively and, you know.
And that's what they did. So the system that kept them there for longer. Of course, people like Peru, he would get enough money and he'll buy their freedom and he'll get them out of there bit by bit, you know. So he did a lot of things, you know. The guy, first of all, tried to liberate India, but he came to Guyana to liberate people. And I would like to say this much. God bless this man. Because his heart is in the right place. He did stuff unconditionally. He was a good man. And I'm really, really happy and proud to be his great-grandson.
Wow. Good for you.
Thank you.
Good for you.
Now, Peru married this lady named Radha. And I wrote about Radha. Radha was that was lady's daughter. And my mother knew her. And she said she was a tall woman and nobody messed with her. And so that we could talk about Radha all day. But she was a very, very popular woman. And after she and Peru got married, they had kids, and they moved to Berbice, and we are there. I'm Radha's great-grandson, so I like to talk about her on behalf of the women, the Indian women, how strong this woman was. And you know, I tell my nieces and nephews and stuff, you guys should take an example of who she was and what she donated or contributed to this family, so we can all have bits and pieces of that strength. My mother was a very, very strong woman. You know, I'm not talking physically strong, mentally strong. My dad was a worker, but, you know, I see my mother, she inherited this from her mother and her grandmother. So there's a lot, like I said, there's a good genes in there someplace, but we all have good genes. We got to go and find it.
You talked about survival just now. Right. What about the migrant spirit, migration? And we'll go directly to the book now.
Migration.
You talk about survival, back against the wall, and how you find opportunity. Migration. Marble, grass, and glass.
Right.
I mean, a lot of thought has gone into that.
Yes.
Let's hear the thought.
Well, you know, people like Lady and Peru, or Vishnu was his original name. they came from a very wealthy family, and they had marble mansions and a lot of privilege, that very wealthy people. And they left the marble mansions for various reasons. Some, depends what their background was. But those two, for example, they left and they came to Guyana under different circumstances. That's the marble. In addition to that, when my father was an orphan and he didn't have much to do, he would dream at night when sleeping under some shelter that his mother and father would come and take him to this fancy marble mansion, and she would sing to him and he would tell him story and take him fishing and stuff like this, and he'd wake up back in this little old shack someplace. And so the marble thing is that whether they lived in it or the visions that my dad had became the marble. When they came to Guyana, of course, there was no marble mansion. They lived in grass huts because a lot of them could not afford very much. So that's the grass. So there was a grass hut. And
they were placed there.
Yeah.
Most of them were placed in the logis.
Well, the logis, and after the logis, when they left the logis to start life out and become farmers, all they could do was build little grass huts and the mud wall, the wattle and daubing and stuff like this. Yeah. That's where they lived. And so that's the grass part. The glass part is that, I've been a business executive for many years. I work in fancy offices, so I call it glass office. So we went from marble in India to grass huts in Guyana, with people like me end up working in big fancy glass offices. And so we go from generation to generation to generation, from extreme to extreme to extreme. And I settled on that title because I came up with about 15 different titles. And I stayed up many, many nights thinking, should I use this? And I finally said, you know what? I like this one. I wrote every word in this book. I designed the cover. I did everything in this book because I didn't want anybody to mess with it. This is a making in 40 years. It took me 40 years to put this together. I went to India. I traveled. I hired people to drive me across India. I went to all the villages, to the battlefields, and eventually end up in what they call the Hooghly River, where the ships sail from, to bring these people across down the river into Kalapani, into Guyana. And it was the most fascinating thing. It was the most emotional trip for me because I heard the stories, but I don't care if you're built of granite or rock. I stood there and I cried. I felt sorry for them. I really did. I could see, and I talk about that in the epilogue, I stood in that river for about 2 hours, and I could almost visualize these people being pushed and shoved into the ship by these Arcatis, these recruiters, and they were sent away. And I remember the last thing I did, I said, dear God, please take these people to heaven and tell them that the family is fine. We've survived. Thank you for the prayers. Thank you all you did. And I told them all, please go to heaven. We're fine. Just I'm sorry what happened. But thank you for giving my genes. Thank you for giving my toughness. Thank you. Whatever you give me, it's working. But please go to heaven. I'm fine, I have never cried so much in my life. I'm not a crying person. But, emotion is something that it was so much emotion, so much bottled up in me that it came out. People would walk by, they'd look at me, thought I was weird or something, I don't know, but I was standing in this river and seeing all these things, and I stood there just crying and crying and crying for about 2 hours. And I came out of there, I felt like a whole different person, like this burden was lifted off me, that I'm going to go home and write this book. And I did.
Like it was like a baptism. What you call a baptism? You went into the water, you came out a new person.
I came out a new person.
You said you're a lay preacher also.
I like that. I have a new baptism.
I think earlier you mentioned that one of the reasons for the book, writing the book, apart from that emotional outburst, was a vision. Someone appearing to you on one of your walks.
Yes. Yeah. That happened about 1980, and I used to run a lot back then, and I used to go jogging in the evening, and I lived out in the country, so I run down this country road every day, and I was jogging going west one day. It was about 6 o'clock or 7 o'clock in the evening, whatever, and there was this cloud, And cloud, we see clouds, different shape, different form. And I saw this cloud, and it was shaped like a man, and it was an impressive looking character. And I keep looking at that, and for some reason, I thought of my grandfather, Dasai, who died in the 1918 pandemic. And like this guy was staring at me, and I came home, and I thought, that was a fascinating, image, whatever it is, And I thought,
meeting.
Yeah, I don't know the man, but the way he appeared, I thought about him. And as the days went on after that, I kept thinking about him. And I said, maybe he wants me to tell his story. He died so tragically that he thinks his grandson should tell his story. Now, that's just my imagination. I don't know. But sometimes the empowerment that comes from within or from above or wherever, it inspired me to do this. And that's where this whole thing started. That happened 40 years ago. And more and more, I got into it. I think this image drove me to do this. And I've looked in the Western horizon ever since then. I said, come on, show me something, And
you're looking for a sign?
No more sign. No more sign. Okay, all right, I'll do my job. And I hope he's pleased with what I did.
I'm sure, at least with this first publication, over 300 pages, I'm sure.
350.
I'm sure there's a lot of people who, and you did mention it, a lot of people who are pleased, including Desai, pleased with what you have done. There have been good times, there have been bad times, and you paid homage to, which I like, many of the women.
Yeah.
Right? And I have here where you give thanks. God bless USA, thank you. God bless Mother India, thank you. And Guyana. So you...
Also
England.
England
also England, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, okay,
Yeah.
you know the book more
Yeah.
than me.
And actually, I do sing all 4 national anthem. I know them all. I can sing them all very well. And when we have family reunions, the young kids, they say, Uncle Sham, would you please go sing all the national anthems? I'll sing them all, and then my Canadian cousin would sing the Canadian one, but I'll sing Jana Gana Mana Dina. I could sing God Save Our Gracious Queen. I could sing Star Spangled Banner, on Dear Land of Guyana. And I know the words, and that's who I am. I'm a package of all these culture, and I've somehow managed to put some beautiful ribbon, put this package together, goes, look, world, this is who I am. I'm a simple little boy from quarantine, but simple people, average people can do extraordinary things. I'm not saying I'm doing extraordinary things. I'm saying every one of us have the capability if we have the desire to do it.
That's why I've turned to this. Right? You're acknowledging
Yeah.
where you came from. You're acknowledging the ancestors.
Yeah.
But importantly, you're acknowledging the countries,
The
what
nations.
they have, the nations,
Yep.
what they have given to you,
What they've given to me.
which is a wonderful thing. And you say you know the national anthem before.
Yeah,
I mean,
I don't,
how better can it get?
Yeah,
mean,
I don't blame the British. There are a few bad people, like this. I wrote about John Gladstone. Who
Yeah.
was just, he was not a nice man. His son was Prime Minister of India. And, that's all history. But in every crate there's a couple of rotten apples, and they were not nice people, and they had these henchmen, these drivers, and overseers did their dirty work for them. But I always say, I read someplace once upon a time that evil will only survive if good people do not do something to stop it.
If you don't
And my
say
friend,
anything.
a lot of good people came along, Englishmen, whatever, and they put a stop to this thing.
Yeah, yeah,
And whether it's slavery or indentureship, whatever. And you know what the British did? They call our ancestors, they call them indentured servants, but they treat them like slaves. They redefined and reinvented slavery is what they did,
Yeah. Not too long ago, a few weeks gone back, I did an interview with Thomas Harding. Yeah, Mr. Thomas Harding, on his book called White Death.
Okay.
It was a wrong being done to
Yep.
the enslaved people.
Yep.
Many of us are benefiting, continuing to benefit,
Right. Yes, we are.
and we owe them a
We
debt.
we certainly do.
All right.
We are the fruits of their labor. We're living their vision and their dream, and shame on us if we do not honor them and tell the story about who they are and what they've done.
Good. We can say the same thing about our own ancestors. And that's why we have Marble, Grass, and Glass by Sham Moteelall.